Hello. Aha, today we have already 33 people. So today is a special session. If you are new to us, hey Umang, hey Abbas, hey Arpreet, hey Arjun, and I'm sure there are many people joining right now. This is our top tech leader cohort Q&A course that we do every week on Saturdays, and today is our last session. And based on the feedback I got from the last session about writing on LinkedIn, people wanted to have a live session more details about how we can write more stories and more resonating stories. So if last week you liked what you learned, that was just the appetizer. Today is the main dish. And I'm very excited to talk about what we're going to learn today. So we're going to give folks like 2 more minutes because as people are joining, we are going to start the session in about 2 more minutes. So I will turn my camera on and audio back on in about 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start now. Now, this is all about storytelling. So while I also talk about the stories, you'll also read some stories because this is about writing more. Telling a story is different than writing. As you put the words on the paper, they'll bother you. I'll show what that means as you start writing. So I'm going to help you with writing some of your most toughest stories. I'll share how I wrote some of my toughest stories. Writing stories is more than following a framework. I followed many different frameworks and I have one for you for LinkedIn. What I want you to understand is today is a direction for you, it's a guideline. If you follow agile methodologies, it's a guideline. So start with this. And as you start writing using this framework, you'll forget about this framework, just like you ride a bicycle. So I want you to be open towards this fact that Taha is a guide over here, but he does not know my destination. You will have your own destiny how you write stories. This is why we read different storytellers and they have their own way of writing stories, right? One of my most favorite storytellers on screen is Quentin Tarantino. The guy has a very different style, right? It's not the same as Stephen King or somebody else. They all have their own, right? So be open towards that. Now, one part that I'm telling is parts upfront. It's not just writing about once upon a time. We're going to go beyond that. Now, keep your chat GPT. So I want to open two things. One is your chat GPT, but we won't be using chat GPT that much. We will be using mostly your favorite editor. It could be Sublime for me, but I'm going to use Google Docs right now because I already have some material written down over there. And as we progress, all of us are going to write a story. Okay. You can think about writing a story that you have been thinking about forming for your behavioral interviews, right? It could be a story where you share a conflict with somebody. How do you share that as a story? It's tough, right? So we're going to talk about, so pick a story in your mind that you have been thinking about, right? It could also be a story that something happened yesterday in your life. It's a story. Maybe you're pissed at it, right? I'm going to show you how to use stories to process your emotions as well. This is what I do all the time. All right. So without further ado, we're going to begin. We are going to use again Canva as slides and switch in between Google Doc, LinkedIn, and ChatGPT. Okay, let's open the first page. Hmm, Okay, all right. Storytelling on LinkedIn. This is not going to be long form stories, and there are rules for it. People on LinkedIn have short attention span. When you read somebody's book, your mind has already made up an expectation that I'm going to sit for 1 hour, half an hour, things like it. On LinkedIn, it doesn't happen like that. You're just scrolling, right? And you have to catch their attention. So we'll talk about how to catch their attention using hooks as well. But first, before we begin, I was looking at my yesterday, last night to share, hey, what can I share from my this year? This is exactly 1 year. In 1 year, these are my top three posts. If you look at them, all top three posts are stories. This is why they resonate. I can write a sharp hook, but it won't matter. What matters is a story. People like to hear about stories. In this story, for example, if you start thinking at it, at Microsoft, I once joined a war room at 2 a.m. The VP of Azure was sharing his Visual Studio screen, debugging deep in the weeds. That's the hook. Why is that a hook? Right? We'll talk about that. Why is that a hook? Why something not sharper, like a claim? Same thing's happening over here. There's a claim as well. Another story starting over here. So I'll show you why these stories, how to write stories like this today. By the end, you will have a story which you can shape later on to polish something like this. But you'll have a story where you will begin something like this in this text, where something deep about you, something that catches their attention. Now, here's my first story, which I wrote in 2022 when I was first starting on LinkedIn. This got 48 likes. I was surprised because I had less than 500 followers. Well, few of them were my friends and family members. So the first story was like this, and let me share that story so we can see the elements of my first story and how unpolished it was, but it had the elements of storytelling. So the hook that I had was how to grow in your career. This is a search engine optimized. I want people to come and find value. So that was my hook at that time. And you can still use hooks like this. They are search engine optimization. I don't typically use hooks like this anymore. Like you see at Microsoft like that, I could write it like this. But this is one way you can also start because it's a short form story. People are looking for advice. So I use this as a hook. Next thing, I start something in which is something called an ordinary world. For the first 8 years of my career, I worked quietly in my cubicle. This is how you introduced a character, which is you in a story. Then one day, I presented a simple idea in a 5 slide presentation. As far as slide decks go, it was the worst. I was nervous as a cat with a wired mouse. I don't know how I came up with this line, but I did. I was feeling, when I was thinking about my story, I was back into that scene in that conference room where I'm sitting. There's a PM sitting, there's my peer sitting, and I'm like sitting, and my boss had told me to present my ideas about refactoring in some slides. And I just put something together with screenshots, mostly code base and design docs, and I was just talking through them. And I was feeling nervous. This is exactly what you want to do when you're thinking about writing your own story. This is not about computing something logical or rational. You're living a memory. So you want to start writing in that scene as to what you were, what's happening at that time, what you are feeling. This is not going to be published. This is just your draft one for yourself. So I want you to write things like this. And we'll do that today. But I'm showing you right now how an unpolished story, which you polished with some without even ChatGPT, would that look like? But what's happening over here is that you're showing that from the ordinary world, you had a challenge. There's a call to adventure, and you were not ready for it, or something was happening with you. Like it wasn't easy. You have to show that. Imagine a story where the hero is already strong and people come and this can. Even Superman has, the movie has places where Superman is defeated and then he wakes up. So you need to have something in which it is not a clean cut story. Nobody likes those stories. Then a colleague approached me. He praised my presentation skills and shared thoughts on my idea. I started believing that I could be great at presenting. So you got to show there was somebody, either a book, your boss, an event, something that inspired you to take on that challenge head on more. And then you started be so I said, hey, I didn't believe in myself. Then I started believing in myself because and we can all resonate when somebody comes up and gives us some, kudos. So this story also feels authentic. Without this colleague, if I said, hey, then I had a dream and I had this revelation, hey, I can do something. It's not believable. So introduce people who are part of your journey. A lot of times we leave them out. We don't even think about it. I'll talk about as you form the story, how to look in those corners which you're not looking. I, by the way, did not remember this person. Then I remember who it was as I continued writing my more stories. And then this draft one changed to draft two, where I introduced a slide. This slide wasn't there. 5 years later, I led 26 plus teams across 4 time zones. Other than speaking up, I learned 3 lessons from that experience. So then I talk about what people are saying in your career. That's your hook. How to grow in your career. The grow in your career is not about presentation skills. That led to something else, right? What it led to is, other than speaking up, I learned 3 lessons from that experience. A few words of encouragement can go a long way. If you want to grow in your career, the advice over is that you need to find a way to believe in yourself. But if your friend wasn't there, then how would you do it? Right? So be your own sponsor. Tell yourself great stories about yourself. Think about what you have done previously. Bring those things back into it. Now, this is also emotional intelligence. As you write stories, people can resonate because stories are all about emotions. They're not about rational logic, even though we think that. Like we had a question over there, stories with data, for example, data will come. I actually had a video, I forgot where it is, where the person telling a story with all this data and everyone is like confused. Because stories are not about data. Stories are emotional level. Emotions don't understand data. Be your sponsor. Tell yourself great is about yourself. So when you say to yourself repeatedly these things, hey, I'm a great storyteller, I'm a great storyteller, you might start doing it. Guess what happened? Identities are powerful. They drive conversation in our minds. Lately, I've been telling myself, I'm a great storyteller. Think about this. When I wrote this story, it was just my first story that I was writing online. In 2022, I wrote down that I'm a great storyteller. Not I will be. I am a great storyteller. Your body wants to believe that you are something. So as you go towards the journey today, a lot of us has feelings that, hey, I'm not this, I'm not enough, I'm not that. You have to tell yourself that you're already that person. This is why your emotions, your body will start thinking about, I want to write more. Because writing stories will challenge your deepest fears as you go into them. For example, telling that I was nervous in a presentation, at that moment, even though it seems easy now, I write harder stuff than this. But it was very hard for me to admit that, hey, I was Like I was feeling nervous in a presentation. I rather show myself as polished on LinkedIn with only 500 followers. There's a lot of imposter syndrome going on, right? And this was also written without any framework. I just thought about it, but it was a natural way of telling a story. Let's go back to our presentation. And over here, today, we are going to cover only one piece in this entire piece that you'll learn. How to grab attention when you write a story, how to build trust through your story, and how to write in a way that people remember your expertise. You're not chasing likes. I'll tell you what you're chasing. You're chasing impressions. Impressions are more important. How many people have looked at your post versus how many people have liked your post? We talked about this in the last one, where likes don't lead to more impressions. The logic says it should, it does not. On LinkedIn, people like mostly that stuff which they already agree with. Like consistency is good, show up every day. Okay. But the stuff that will tell you how to show up consistently every day, which is about dealing with your imposter syndrome, if you go into that, people will read that stuff because it will challenge them, but they won't like it because touching it means, I'm revealing myself that I believe in this. But they'll read it. Those stories will hit the most. What you're trying to do is being remembered. So in these, to make that whole thing happen, we have five things to cover today. First, I'll teach you my framework, which I just talked about. We'll write a story today. Then I'll show you, you can also pick among four types of different stories that you should talk about on LinkedIn. These will drive not traffic, not followers. These are specifically to create resonance with the audience. So hiring managers, other people remember you. They give you a call, they give you job opportunities, you're building trust. Then once you do that part, remember attention part, hooks. Hooks are all about making a promise. I made a promise to you today. You are going to write a story. That's a promise. Now, by the end, if the promise is not delivered, you won't like this session. That's just the case. If a story has a promise and you don't fulfill it, people don't like it. One of the classic examples is if you have watched this show called Lost, the last episode of all those seasons was the worst episode. It did not fulfill the promise. In fact, nobody knew the promise, by the way. It was going on, and the series just finished with nothing. Another one to think about if you've watched Game of Thrones, the promise was the king, the White Walker King. And a lot of build-up around him through series about, he's at a distance, he's staring at people, he's on horses, and he died with just one knife stab. Oh, that was so horrible. People hated that. So when are making a promise, you want to make sure you fulfill that promise because when you fulfill the promise, people remember you at that moment. Okay. Here we're going to go into the chapter framework. First part is I want you to think about a story like I mentioned, a story that you want to talk about, a story that's been on your mind. Maybe it's a conflict story. Maybe it's a story about your promotion. Imagine you go to an interview and somebody says, "Tell me about your most the project you're proud of." That could be a story. Tell me a story where you had a conflict. What happened? And what did you do? That could be a story. Tell me about a place where you mentored someone, right? So you have these stories coming up. I want you to think about whatever comes to your mind. Typically, the first thing that's coming to your mind is what your body wants to write about. Pick that one. Don't think too much about it. I want you to think about when you're writing this, and we write this together. Comfort. So think about like when I was saying, um, for the first 8 years of my career, I sat in my cubicle, right, writing code and stuff. That's the comfort part. This is typically what you are doing. It could also be where you can also start by saying, this is generally, in movies and all, or old stories, once upon a time, right? This is kind of a thing, but we want to only briefly mention in one line what that is, right? So that could be a place which is simple life in a familiar place. What happens? Your audience gets into it because that's what their comfort, that's what their starting pieces as well. So while you have salespeople and marketing people on LinkedIn, If you talk, when I talk about 8 years of my career, I sat in my cubicle writing code, for example, that's when software engineers are thinking about, not in anybody else, because you're resonating with them. So in your comfort place, make sure you write something about you, something in an environment which others can also resonate. In the other story which I wrote about at Microsoft, I saw, right? So that's also a part about where it's a comfort, it's a simple place, familiar place. At the same time, I want you to think about you in that environment, there was a call for hunt. Somebody called you to do something, like there was a challenge. I'm going to show you a story over here as we write about this. Hold on. Okay. This is the hook that I wrote. This is the original hook. I would not use this hook again, but this is the hook I have. You can't judge a book by its cover, but boy, were they wrong about me. So these two lines will show up on the link in the top because they're first top three lines. So remember, your hook is three rows of LinkedIn. Those who did not were not in the first session, first line, second line, third line. So I'm using two lines over here, and I have a break over here intentionally. I don't want to use this line over there. So, and it also tells people that something important is coming because you're dropping two lines with a spacer over here. So you can judge a book by its cover, something familiar, and then you say, "Boy, what they're wrong about me." So now there is, if somebody's interested, they'll bite into it. It's a cheap hook, but I wrote that hook at that time. Now, here's my ordinary one. I was the hotshot software engineer at Yahoo, assigned to a complex design task by my boss's boss, Vivek. You see that the hunt is already there. This part is this is the part which is my ordinary world. I was the hotshot software engineer at Yahoo. Ordinary world. Engineers, Yahoo, those terms are already coming in. Assigned to a complex design task, that's the thing. And then I can elevate that by saying my boss's boss, Vivek. Let's call him that. At that moment, I write, let's call him that. I become more bold. I actually don't write this anymore. Vivek. Now, people can think Vivek is a fictionary name or it's a real name. I did not put his last name. I did not put his LinkedIn name. So I'm good. This was his real name. Um, so I want you to think about something like this. Okay. And as you do that part, I'm also going to write something over here about a news story that I'm going to write with you. And we'll go into this piece. So take a moment, open up a Google Doc, and let's start writing a story over there. Like I want you to write some, imagine your ordinary world and what challenge you had. I'm also writing mine on the back, but I'm not showing it. And I will show it once we're all ready. And let's take 2 minutes for this quickly. Doesn't have to be polished. Okay. The key thing about writing a story and what you're writing is that doesn't need to be polished. This is draft one. Just write whatever comes to your mind. Nothing polished, nothing specific. It would be 5 lines. Because you can always use Chat GPT later on, which I'll show you, to reduce and make it more, improve that. So here's my first line. It's a new story. I was a principal engineer at Yahoo, reporting to the VP of engineering, who called me in for an ad hoc meeting. I want you to be the manager of your team. Right? Maybe I could say he said like that. Right. So there is ordinary world. I was a principal engineer reporting to VP of engineering who called me in for an ad hoc meeting. And then this is call to action. I want you to be the manager of your team. So far, we are not facing any difficulty. It's just a call to challenge. You see, very fast, like fast moving stuff going on. I want to take a break and see just quickly if somebody has any questions, you can put in the chat and I can see if any questions are coming up. If you wrote something, that would be great. I would love to see that. Be open to the community. It's a safe place. We all share ideas over here. Be comfortable. You can also privately message me if that's more feasible to you.
I had a question here. So we're talking about the hunt and stuff. Does it have to be successful at the end, or can it be the opposite as well?
Let's. So what you're talking about, Umang, is something amazing. It's a feeling which you're already having. I have a story, but there is no success. I'll tell you what it needs to have. Does it have a lesson?
Yes.
That's it. That's all that matters. Those are actually the best stories. In fact, I'll tell you, I wrote a story recently, which was my complete failure, but people loved it most. It's called the Gollum effect. At the
Mhm.
end, the engineer left me, and I saw after 1 year she's thriving under a different manager, right? So those are the best stories. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I love this one, Varun. During my early years, while I was on call, so that's your ordinary world, monitoring my dashboard. Oh, I love this part. You're doing a setup, right? We are walking in, yeah, and then suddenly you drop it. It looked like blood written all over. I love this imagery as well. You're already adding texture. This is advanced storytelling versus just telling things. People, we go by objects, we go by these things. Now, blood may be a little bit too much for LinkedIn. Just saying. But if I were to write on my Substack, and I'm a career coach and I don't care about being employable, I would write that actually. I might steal that. It's really good. Awesome. Good work. Okay, let's see another one. Um, Gaining confidence from a non-tech boss is tough. Actually, the contrary is true. They trust you more than technical CTO. I don't understand where this is coming from. If impressions matter more than likes, why like your own post soon after? Because that's a very good one. In fact, I would say not like, love it. What happens that this is not about liking. I have 85,000 people who follow me. If I do a post, that's an engagement that I do, and my audience get to see it, but not all 85,000. Up to 10% of my audience gets to see one engagement. It's also up to LinkedIn how LinkedIn does that. Now, if I again love my post, a subset of different or overlapping gets to see it. This is why you want to do that part. So more of your audience can see it. It's like coloring a book. Or when you do on Mac and stuff where you put your fingerprint for your like ID and stuff and you keep on tapping it, tapping it, tapping it. It works like that. Your audience gets to see more of you the more you engage with your post. That's why you want to do this piece. So you're getting more impressions with you. Now, likes do work. It's not like it doesn't work. Let's for example, if Umang comes and likes it, yeah, his audience gets to see it. But if the post is not good, his audience, few of them will see it, and LinkedIn will notice that people are not reading it all the way. You get more impressions when people read and spend time on reading it. That's when LinkedIn says, "Oh, this is an important post." In fact, LinkedIn, guessing, they have a metric that says the ratio. Fewer likes, higher impressions. That ratio is what LinkedIn chases. These are the posts that people are reading, but they're not touching it. It's more important. It's hitting them. Let's do more over here. I'm transcribing this call with, okay, go ahead. You can transcribe. I really like the Golem of Health. Thank you. I was working at Netscope as staff engineer, assigned a critical bug where if it does not fix, we could see a serious customer churn. I would say this is good, but you also are stating the cost over here. This can be improved, but this is a good idea to begin with. Don't delete that part. Keep it there, like this. Don't change that. It's your draft one. Remember this piece. Um, I was sitting with the chief data scientist of Chevron, and all our models were failing. I love this one. You walk me into a trap. I was like, this is a setup, right? Setup is something, yeah, ha ha ha, like a regular day, ordinary, right? I'm walking into it and suddenly, bam, right? You're doing exactly that. This is a setup and a punchline like this part. Um, what's wrong with me? Sorry, cat, all the time. No, not all, not in all places. When did it start? This is a bit vague, Uma. Um, Also, it's a question about saying what's wrong with me. It's a part where people might not want to come at the moment. And the audience you might attract is going to be people who are depressed at the moment, for example. Right. And it's a good one if I were a psychologist or if I were somebody who was trying to help people come out of their trauma or things like it. But I would not start with that writing a story if you want to find a job. Hook, I was called for the mid-year review. Uh, enter unprepared. Okay, I think it's a good way to start. But I'll tell you why that would. So as you go forward, I'll show you why that will not stick with people. It's a good idea though, but you want to write that in a different way, and you'll learn that today. I was called. No. Do I have still have it in me? I'm an average performer. Don't write this question. Do I still have it in me? I'm average performer in my college. No great aspiration, just a normal guy. You are speaking. So I like where you're going with this, Bharat. And I'm going to show you again, it has the same piece of entered unprepared. What's happening is that you're exposing. Exposing means you're telling people what to believe about you versus showing through action. Like I was saying, I was hotshot software engineer at Yahoo, assigned to a complex design task by my boss's boss. I did not reveal anything about myself. I'm basically not performing or performing I'm not. In fact, I showed how I felt about myself, right? But the hook over here is exposing a lot more. But the idea is good. I'm not saying don't write about the story. We'll learn how to write that story in draft two. So keep this line as is. You will see how to make it better. I'm working at SZ handling tough releases, meeting strict deadlines, and one fine day, Friday, while I was called in a day, critical production risk, and I was pulled into a meeting. I like this part. This is great. This is good. Keep it. Okay, last two. I walked into quarterly look back meeting with confidence. My team in the past quarter delivered good results. I'm confident in this meeting. I know back and forth. I can speak in detail. The team was great. The meeting went smoothly. So this is a lot of stuff going on, and then you talk about this. It's good. So keep it, Tuan. We're going to reduce that later on because the material is too much, right? We want to reduce it later on, but the spine is there. Very good. You want to write more like this. Like even if it's like a one more paragraph, it's completely okay. First jobs always have leave marks, especially when you start as a new fintech company, unicorn. Before young kids starting. Okay, this is good starting. I would say because you are starting with a hook about a story saying, hey, this is what to expect in the story. And people who have those marks, they might want to attach themselves to it. Okay, I like this part. Okay. Became an EM 15 years and I see though it would be smooth said, oh boy, I was wrong. I like this one, Manoj. This is very good. So what Manoj also just did, oh boy, I was wrong, right? Was I wrong? I do this a lot too, by the way. This is called copy work. You can take, like I just showed this line over there, right? You can take somebody's line and then attach it in a different way that it makes a whole new meaning. So it's no longer copying somebody's work. For example, I also use those terms from there. So, and I use a lot from other authors as well, which I like, I read. I'm going to show you today a few of them as well. So this is good. Let's go back to our writing, continue writing the story. Okay. So then the next step that you're going to write, since we know the comfort, we know the hunt, what are you avoiding? That's the part we want to see now. So how does avoidance look like? There is something that the task requires you to do, but you're avoiding it. And that will come over here. The stakes were high, but I knew I had it in the bag. Little did I know I was about to learn a hard lesson. This is a little bit foreshadowing. You can do that part. You can choose to skip it. But if you write this down, here's what's happening. Remember, I told you to make a promise. So here's how promises feel like. Just so it's the latest, something is going to come later on, but I'll show it to you right now because this is something that you will keep on writing as you're going through this piece. This is one of my favorite movies, and I don't know if it's your favorite. Some people like it, some people hate it, but this is one of my favorite movies. And Let me know if you can hear the noise, the sound. Or if you cannot, just type it in.
With luck, my search will not be in vain. Look to my coming. At first light on the 5th day. At dawn, look to the east. Go.
So this is where Gandalf makes a promise. Yeah, Lord of the Rings Twin Towers. Were you guys able to hear the audio? I couldn't put subtitles over there last night. Okay, awesome, right? So this is what Gandalf says, like two towers, right? I'm leaving. And then they starts fighting for next 15, 20 minutes. Lot of fighting happening, blood, fire, and stuff like it. They're dying, right? Now here's the other one. Okay, did I do it? Okay,
Ride out with me.
they're all
Ride out and
scared.
meet them.
This is the lowest point
For
in the war
death
for
and
them.
glory. For Rohan. For your people.
The sun is rising.
Look to my coming. At first light on the 5th day. At dawn, look to the east.
Yes. Yes.
Some foreshadowing
The
done
Horn
again,
of
just to
Hell
remind them.
Hammerhand.
Now, as we go forward, they're going to be fight. They're going to all go out, and then as they're fighting, come on, they're fighting, and then there you go. Look to the east.
Theoden King stands alone. Not alone. Rohirrim! To the king!
All right. I realized I again went into watching the movie. It's such a good movie. So you see the promise that was made. Look to the east. Foreshadowing. 15 minutes. So what's happening is that the reader, the audience, they're tracking it. Some part of their emotion is keep on tracking it. And the moment you fulfill that, like I still get goosebumps, I'm not kidding, when you hear about the promise being fulfilled. And this is when things stick. So just telling a story, I want you to also add some foreshadowing a little bit here and there when you see the opportunity. I added this foreshadowing after in draft two. In draft one, right now, don't try to put foreshadowing. If you can, great, but don't do it. Foreshadowing can always introduce because you will see opportunities later on. Okay. Right now, just go with the straight story flow. So as we go back into where is that page again? Okay. Keeps losing it. Okay. So this one. Over the weeks, as I worked on the design, I began to feel increasingly isolated, finding it difficult to connect with my colleagues. I couldn't understand why my interaction with others often left them frustrated. You see that part? These two, just these two. They're showing there was something that I was avoiding. I did not write. I was avoiding social interactions or working with my colleague. But what I'm saying is that I felt isolated as I was working, and I found it difficult to connect with my colleagues. And then someone is showing I could not understand why my interactions with others often left them frustrated. This is my internal challenge. This is the part that you have to talk about. Without this, the story doesn't have a motive for your behaviors change. So so you want to think about what is that one behavior, and going back to Umang's point, what is that one behavior that you are going to deliver as a lesson? This is the part where you'll identify your behaviors change. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask you to think about, I'm going to actually copy paste into the chat so you have an idea over there. I'm also going to write this part in my story, so I want you to write as well. A question for the end, is it suitable and how to actually apply storytelling to the day-to-day work, especially when leading a team? Yeah, we have all those examples, but if I don't cover it, please mention it at the end when we finish this part. Let's go to write these points about what was your main challenge. This is the most difficult part, by the way. I'm not kidding. Many people miss this piece. Even when they go to behavioral interviews, they'll talk about, hey, I had a conflict and I escalated, right? But if you were not escalating, what was one behavior you had to change? And people say, no, the other person was an asshole or they were playing politics. If you have all those things, then you're having difficulty finding your behavior change. Actually, let me make this easy. I realize this is probably perhaps the most difficult part in writing up this story. Like, yeah, I got the adventure, now the conflict starts, right? I'll mention this story over here. I have talked about writing this story many times. And as I was today having coffee and thinking about how will I talk about this area, one story popped up. And this story had always been there, but I had never found this point. This is the most recent one. This is like less than 1 hour ago, I realized this point. When I was leaving Yahoo, I was going to Microsoft. I was sitting with the boss, and he was an ex-Microsoftian. Had spent 12 years over there in Visual Studio.net. This guy was smiling and he was saying, hey, I asked him, hey, do you have any advice for me? You have seen me for a while now, 6 months. I did not like him. And he was saying that when he came from Microsoft at Yahoo, in the beginning, he was not happy for the first few months, couple of months. And what happened was when he would send invite to people, they would not accept it, reject it, or do anything, not even reply, like most of them. And then in the meeting, they would just show up randomly after 5 minutes or leave in between or bring food, sit in the corner. So he said, I felt offended. Like, what's happening? Because at Microsoft, if you send invites, either they accept it or reject it, or if they're coming late, they email you, uh, courtesy, everything. But over here, this wasn't happening. And so he said, and he has spent 12 years over there. So he started thinking that people are being racist because he's Asian, they're treating him like this. But as went around, and I was thinking when he was saying this, like, no. And he was saying that I started realizing that it wasn't just me. They were doing this to vice presidents too. Like this was the culture over here. So he said, when you go to Microsoft, you will find you need to be careful about your allergic reactions. Things that you're used to, but in a new environment, when you go, those things will give you some allergic reaction. It doesn't mean those things are wrong. It just means that those things are okay in the environment, but you are finding allergic reaction. So if you show your allergic reactions, people will feel you don't belong there. So he said for the first few months, notice your allergic reactions, but don't react to them. Now, that's a great story, right? The guy talked about his own um, feelings as to what he felt coming from Microsoft to Yahoo, and he gave me a lesson. That was my story. Then I realized, hey, if I were to say this was my story, like, how would I make this? How would I make this my story? Meaning, I learned something. I learned something from my boss, and this is completely true. There's a partner who's giving me advice. How can I make this a more stronger story about myself? I thought realizing what behavior I needed to change. So yeah, there is a allergic reaction I need to change, but wait. I didn't like my boss over there. I don't tell this to people. I just told this to you in the story. My boss was probably giving me feedback that I had I react when he gives me feedback or something that he finds he wants me to change, but because I'm used to a certain behavior, I find it allergic. Then I went back and realized that the feedback he gave me about the racy model and how to change the way I'm working, which I wasn't. I was a new manager. And I realized, damn, that was a different way of giving me feedback about how I work on my story. You see, the story just became powerful. Before that, I had an OD. I was happy, and it was his challenge. But when I sat down and talked about what is the behavior that I had to change, the story became more interesting. It became more authentic, right? Because I challenged over there. So I want you to sit right now and think about any story you had, especially the conflict one. What is a behavior change that you had to do? Write about that one. I'm going to write about mine. 2 minutes. Okay. All right. I like this one. Let's see. Wow, a lot of stories. It's so good. Don't worry about it. This is draft one. Yeah, so there was a time when I needed to help reduce release. I was not in the bed of roses. This is awesome. So this is how you want to start. This is amazing. Think about my story. I went to stack ranking meeting. I was nervous when it was my turn to talk my team. I was chewed. I lost trust, never to rebuild. But I learned a very important lesson that they realized later. Later, this was nice, not kind. So you're doing a lot of exposing over here, Umang. It's not a story. You're
I
telling
know.
us, right? So
I
we'll do that
know.
part. No, no, but that's how you want to start, right? So your outline, and you can expand that. But one of the best ways to write the story is to imagine that you are closing your eyes and you're sitting in that moment, and then you are going towards that like line by line things. Sometimes, you know what I do, the hardest stories, I would turn on the voice recorder as I go on my walk, and I'll start talking into it. So now I have a draft one like that. Okay, this is good, this is good. Okay, I'm going to show you something that I wrote over here, and I'll get back to the stories piece. My piece is not, because I realized as I'm writing with you this story is a bit more complicated, but I'll show you what's going on over here. It's okay. So I wrote, I want you manager of your team. I said, I was happy and puzzled. Why me? So you have to show something over here, like puzzled. Now it creates a confusion. Okay, why is he puzzled? Why me? You're already interviewing. Not anymore, he said. This works like page rank. So now I've introduced a familiar term over here, page rank. So imagine you're telling a story over there, and this is exactly what my boss used. So I don't have to like come up with any new frameworks or words to use over here. The team reports to me right now, and they send me emails about their work and their time off, and all of them mention you. I've spoken to Taha. Here's how I'm modifying it. Then I see Ratan sitting at your desk waiting for you while you're smoking behind the building. He stayed. Right. And over here, I have a line over here that I says, Ratan is the tech lead. No, he's the manager for the Yahoo Mail team. He's the senior director. At Yahoo, you could not see people's titles. They all put like, I couldn't change my title to technical Yahoo. That's it. Just out of like humbleness or whatever you want to call it. And this guy literally would wait for me, and my boss was right there sitting, and he could see that this guy was coming, and I'm not there because he knew I smoked at the behind the building at that time. And so there was also some feedback coming and some behavior change. See, I'm building some character over here. Um, when everything points to you, the result goes up in ranking. See, now I fulfilled a promise that I made. A promise was this works like page rank. Then I showed what it looks like, right? And then I finished by saying, when everything points at you, the result goes up in ranking, right? Now, so far, I haven't chased my challenge yet. See, that's another piece because I'm delaying my challenge. I'm still doing a setup because the story requires that. So now the challenge comes up to be, I was the team lead, but the team lost their manager and they were scared. And I can write more because it's taking time and we have to move forward. The area over here was I had no management expertise. I was a technical lead and I did not know how to work with them. And all I was doing was to keep things running and moving. That was my main challenge. But at the same time, the key challenge over here was me not being able to work with Ratan and other people. And I will talk about how I did that in the same conversation. So you can have a dialogue, let's say in a meeting that you're having with your boss, and the boss is asking you to do something, and you say, yeah, I could not do this. I did it, thank you, but you know, I'm not perfect because I need help with Ratan work, but other people are actually having trouble with me, right? And then that's when the boss will give me feedback about what to change. When I go back to this story with Yahoo story, the feedback over here that the person gave me, and we are going to go into this partner phase now, is Vivek noticing my struggles, scheduled a follow up. How's the design coming along? You see, this is dialogue and action going on. If you write, Vivek came and told me, you're not doing this right, and here's how you should do it, it's boring. It's not storytelling. We just telling people. You got to show what's happening. This is showing people. I'm going to stop sharing and see any comments that people wrote over here. Okay. So I want you to think about again in your challenge stage, what was that behavior that you were avoiding? So let's say over here, this one, they couldn't complete integration on time, which created risk and time. So right now, I don't see what is your challenge. What is you are avoiding? What's that something you are avoiding? It could come in later as well. I at least in this draft one, you're writing it. I want you to know that part. Because the thing about storytelling is that the way I'm writing my story right now is a more advanced version right now because I've been practicing it. But I want you to write down like a section over there. Okay, my behavior change was this much. My like this was something I was avoiding, like specifically. I don't adapt, I resisted, I pushed back in meetings. Okay, that was good. This is what you're so now you're exposing, but it's good you're writing this down. We're gonna convert this into later on into how to do the action plus dialogue. Okay. Let's go to the next one. I mean, we're already at 1 hour. This is something that happens with me. I get excited and I go over behavior change that Taha needs to do when teaching online master classes. Okay. Look at the next one. So I got Vivek. Over here, I had my boss, another boss. In the story of Yahoo and Microsoft about meeting agenda, there was also my boss over there who was a partner, but the way he was delivering was also something deeply personal to me and him. And I was avoiding that. I didn't know that the lesson was there. So that revelation creates vulnerability with the person who's listening. And they believe you more because you're not polished over there. And you're not saying, hey, you know what? I was not doing well. No, or I was resisting things. You're showing through action, right? So let's go. Yeah, you want to put on mute right now? Okay. Let's do this one again. So I want to finish the story so you get an idea about it. So here's the story how it goes. How's the design coming along? He inquired. Done. I responded, pride coloring my voice as I presented my laptop screen. Vivek listened intently as I walked him through the design. He then asked, what does the QA team thinks about this? Have you worked with them to ensure it meets their needs? Met them yesterday, no questions. Vivek furrowed his brow and remarked, that's odd. I just met them. They know nothing about this design. Baffled and defensive, I recounted my interaction with the QA lead, insisting they lacked the necessary knowledge to comprehend my awesome work. You see that? It's also in quotes, like it's an actual dialogue. So I'm exposing very fast, right? Over here, there's a lot of dialogue happening. But if I keep on writing dialogue, 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 it would be like a 4,000 word essay. So on LinkedIn, you also have to show, but then like, and then some places tell and then show a little bit. What happens with showing is that you're being more authentic. When you say this happened, I said this piece, like this is something I specifically remember saying. And this was my go-to thing at that time was saying why I can't talk to other people because, it's also it's also being an asshole, which is exactly what he said. He said, Vivek stopped me mid-sentence and dropped another bomb. They think you're an asshole. All right. This is exactly a harsh feedback. Imagine writing this line that somebody said this to you. A lot of people came to me afterward for coaching. You know what they said? Your story about your boss telling you you're an asshole. They remember it was a boss's what, that you're an asshole. That's exactly the kind of feedback I needed. You see that part? When you write stories like this, you also touch people, resonate with them. And the way I resonated, not through by exposing, is by having this dialogue as they're watching a movie and it's generating emotions. But what's happening in this, the same framework is happening, but it is not exposing. Okay. And then, so that's the feedback, right? Out there hurt. I know you're not one, Vivek continued, but that's the impression you're giving. Feeling cornered, I asked, what can I do? He said, this is your design and you're the best person to discuss. So now we can, in the dialogue, there is wisdom coming along, like my previous boss about allergic reactions and all, right? Now there's dialogue. In this dialogue, exact feedback coming up. Instead of saying I could write, he gave me instruction to communicate better. Boring, right? Yeah, he said you need to learn the language. Exact words, dialogues which you have heard, they create authenticity. They move people. This is called subtext. I'll cover this later on, but this is called subtext. Subtext is what's left unsaid. You trust the reader to fill in the gaps. Because if you write too specifically, for example, if I write, hey, I saw an engineer who's wearing an engineer, he was wearing a black hoodie and like I describe the whole clothes, right? It would take your engineer out of it. What if your engineer is wearing a t-shirt, right? Or something else. So just instead of saying that, I could just say he was an overworked engineer. Now, whatever your definition of overworked engineer is, we'll put that over there, or burning out engineer, or engineer who's a brilliant jerk or something like that. You can just imagine you have your own version. But if I specify too much, that's exposing. Um, so you have to leave descriptions in a way where people can see this text and have their own version in their head. This is the power of subtext. Okay, Vivek's words hit me like a ton of bricks. Now here's what I'm exposing very fast. I realized my arrogance and poor communication skills were hurting not just me, but also my team. Now I have earned saying this because I've said so much uh, showing over here. People now believe that, yes, this is believable and I can just expose it like that. The reason I'm saying exposing and stuff, when you expose things, people don't believe you. It's not authentic. Show us what you did. And once you show enough, now I can believe the words you're saying. Let's finish the story because I want to go through the next phases as well. At that moment, I decided to change, though I knew it wouldn't be easy. So, how do I convey my message if they can understand it? Your message is your responsibility. Deliver it in a way that ensures it's perceived as you intended. This is the main lesson. This is where I failed, not successful at the end, but this is the message I got in that. So it's a classic conflict resolution story. I had a conflict with somebody. Instead of starting with that, I said, hey, there's a time at Yahoo when I was a principal engineer and my boss's boss gave me some work. It was basically figuring out how to work with QA on triaging tickets. And as I went through that part, I was feeling difficulty working with people. And then he came up and then he asked me what's happening. And he said, well, and I lied basically in a way, not thinking I'm lying. But I said, yeah, she doesn't understand my work or prerequisites for it. And then he said, hey, you're an asshole. They're thinking you're an asshole. And I know you're giving a wrong impression about yourself. And then he said, this, your message or response. Basically, he's giving me ownership. It's all about ownership. Your message is your responsibility. Deliver it in a way that ensures perceived as you intended. Now, if I write stories all about like software terms and all, how will anybody understand this? As a classic example, I was at Walmart and senior director, and I worked with business side a lot. The senior vice president who sponsored my entire work on the business side messaged me one day at 9:30 and said, come to this conference room, I want to show you something. So I went over there. He was sitting with his own, staff, all business people who understands stores, customers, associates, right? And they have features to build, but nothing else more than that. On the screen, one of my managers was there and he had his Visual Studio screen opened up, debugger on some variable. And I was looking, what's happening here? And what happened here was there was an issue, an incident, and they were talking about what happened. And this guy was talking to them about a big decimal value that should have been big decimal, but stored as double. And the overflow was happening. And now these people are thinking about like, like, what do we do? Like, what's going on over here? You get the idea. The person did not understand how to convey the message so that the audience can understand this. If this was me as a technical lead at that time with Vivek and all, I would have said, yeah, he doesn't have prerequisite to understand what I'm talking about. But learning to speak that language is so important, right? And that's the lesson. Now, if that person actually wrote a story, because afterwards I gave him feedback, then my job finished after a few months. He may have a story over there to write that, I was once demoing to the senior vice president, and then my boss's boss came and he saw that, and afterwards he pulled me aside and he gave me this feedback. Then that's a story forming up. So I want you to think about these story formations that are happening. I also read other people's stories. What happens is when you read somebody's stories, you say, "Oh, that's me." You start seeing yourself. Something in the past that you have not thought about, somebody puts a spotlight on. That's called shadow work. It kind of triggers you. Oh, this is like my story happening as well. Okay. So now let's go back to our, we're going to take like 20 more minutes and then we'll finish the session. But I want you to still at least finish our story today. We are almost there. So the next step is I want you to find that mentor that you had, a person who gave you in that moment a feedback that helped you identify that behavior change like the way it did in me. What is that behavior change? And who pointed this out? How did you learn about that? Sometimes it's also reading a book. Sometimes it's also going through a course, for example. Like I was once called, my manager once sent me to a leadership training, and over there I learned about drama triangle. I learned about active listening, and I started doing that. That's where I learned I was not listening and how to properly listen, and etc. etc. So there's more learning over there. So I can share that piece. Hey, this is what I learned. Then I went back and I applied it. It could also be a book you read. For example, for me to think about how to uh, how to give people vision and ownership. Simon Sinek's golden circle about start with why. That's more important instead of how and what. That's also a framework you can apply. Hey, I was doing this, I was focused on task and stuff. Then I realized that I need to find the why. Now, a lot of people over here, when I teach them this part, talk about this, managers, they say, yeah, but my boss also doesn't know what the why is. I get it. How many times you have joined a team where the code base was not documented and you sat down, you debug the code, you say where the issues were, you put debuggers pointers here and there, and you figured out what was happening. That's exactly how things work. So you can go back and think about start working with stakeholders, documentation. I start putting things together, right? But it needs to still come from some advice. Without the advice part, then it looks like profits. You're a prophet. You don't want that. So, do you have a person that gave you feedback? I like this one. They say coffee is about difficult people. Mine was about four real fears and avoiding the. Oh, I love this one. This is a very good hook, Jimmy. I'm already hooked. Like, I want to know what those four real fears are now. It's amazing. When I was joined Facebook, I struggled. Everything felt chaotic. Too many voices, no clear direction. I came from an environment where clarity was explicit. Aha. So I kept asking for it. Instead of answers, I was told to talk to people, align, figure my own. That frustrated me. I didn't adapt. I resisted. I pushed back in meetings. I challenged decisions. I tried to propose the operating model that had worked me before. Oh, I love this one. So it's a very good setup, Tuan. It's also that you have been now. The thing is that since you have been told to do this, we need to find something because of which someone, some event, something that you change your mind, like snapped you out of your behavioral change. We need that. So you want to write about that person. Let's see another person being a platform leader. I was helping several cross-functional engineering leaders integrate the latest changes. Many of them felt the process was too rigid and time consuming, especially in the middle of a sprint. Aha, I love this one. Very good. They often couldn't complete the integration on time, which created risk and left teams isolation. I came up with a detail. See, this story is very clean, Arif. Like, okay, so there was a trouble and you showed up and you fixed it. Aha, very good. But then, I mean, you're a perfect person right now. Stories that require you to change behavior, in this case, is very important. Without that, it doesn't work. What happens that then the story needs a hero. Makes sense? A hero, like for example, think about Matrix. Neo, the one. You think Neo was ready on day one? He wasn't ready until the last 5 minutes of the movie. That's when he realized, oh, I can fight. The more you delay the transformation, the more people are invested in you. The moment you say, I became better, done. There's no point. I'm not going to watch that movie in which the hero is just perfect. Right? So you want to showcase where you had trouble in this case. Like Tuan is saying he was having struggle over there, over here. Okay. Okay, this is also good. Robert Greene's Nth Law, the 48 laws of power, and then use coughing at that. Um, He was talking about his struggles. I will lock heads with someone superior. Yeah, you're describing me. He claimed he was clearly and repeatedly conveyed something he didn't for the next few weeks. I was receiving cold stares and very good. So now, Varun, we want in your story also something that changed that behavior in you. Like what made you look again? Oh, I got to think about this differently. Sometimes a story has something in the past. Let me give an example. When I joined USC as a contractor, it's like 20 plus years ago when dot-com bubble was like gone, I was making any job would be fine. And this job required me to code in XML and XSL, building a web page. Imagine writing a web page in XSLT, data is coming in XML. I knew that because prior to that, I was building a mobile platform at Cisco Systems. But I had left that job, not willingly. My boss over there was had his own mind, and I did not like working with him. He had asked to, and I can put specifics over there, but he had asked me to do things which I found, repulsive and things. And he didn't have the ideal behavior that I was expecting in a boss. And there is, see, if I'm say that like that, it's not authentic. You won't feel that. I need to say, what exactly did he say? What exactly did he do? So when I was at USC and I saw that part, the team had made, there was only one engineer on the UI, one backend engineer. A UI engineer was also part-time. He had built two web pages, literally two web pages in 1 year. And he was charging $100 an hour. I told this guy, this is the wrong stack. You don't even have a mobile platform to build. It's just a web page, but it's complicated. Using XML SSLT is not the right way to do. You know what he said? This was a CFO. He looked at me and he said, "You're saying this because you don't know how to do it." Right? He was again doubting me, my skills. He didn't interview me because he was a CFO. He just hired me because of my resume. And so what I could have taken this negatively, but I realized that previously I had reacted like this. I need to figure out a way to work with people who don't understand or not the ideal way of responding. So what this guy needed was trust from me. And what I did was I built him, I gave him 4 screens in 10 days. 4 new screens versus 2 screens in 1 year. Just that. When I sent him the links, he came in 5 minutes to my room and he said, "So you were saying," immediately change the behavior, right? Because I built trust over there. So sometimes your lesson or your things that you struggled is not right in that story. Sometimes it's also your past behavior from a previous role that you're still carrying over there. So don't be afraid to explore that part. Like, for example, Arif, if for example, so why am I saying this? Because when I saw Arif's story, I realized that, hey, if Arif actually did this, he went in, and I have stories like that too, where I went in, I could see issues, and it's coming from experience, past experience. So you need to trace back. You still need to trace back because you need to bring in the part where you actually failed and you learned that over there. And now this is where you are using it. Right. So this is how your storytelling will work really well. So in your actual story, let's say you go for interviews or writing a story online, you don't have to mention the struggle in that specific company, specific role. It can be a double scene. In fact, those are more creative way of writing. Okay, so the text is long over here right now. Anurag, let me read yours. You always deliver what we ask for, um, but we still find out too late when things slip. Aha, love this one. This is very good. So start with the setup. You always do what we ask for, but we still find out too late when things slip. See, you got into a setup and suddenly bam, right? At first, it sounded contradictory. Well, now you are exposing. We know this is contradictory. Don't explain this. When you explain things like this, then you tell the reader they're not smart enough to grab this. Specs were clear, estimates were approved, work was done. So you're again describing something about an event. So I like this part where you're setting about your own contradiction. So maybe this is not, it should be written a different way because it's right now points to this piece versus this piece, right? You can maybe start over there. At first, I thought this was I thought this was So the feeling you're having, so you want to do foreshadowing over here, what you're doing. Specs were clear, estimates were approved, work was getting done. At first, I thought this was okay. So build it like that. At first, I thought it was okay. So now we are thinking, at first he thought it was okay. So then he must have realized it. So now we are waiting for that promise to be fulfilled. And you're describing what it felt because specs were clear, estimates were approved, work was getting done, right? So now we are still following a setup right now. In this way, at first I sound contradictory. It feels like you're exposing this piece versus setting up for the future one. But this is brilliant, by the way. Um, my team. Okay, so now you are describing a story in which you were the savior previously, but then on enjoying working as a catalyst shadow of my team, just like Batman was called by Commissioner. Okay, okay. Okay, how to shorten narratives, putting my points. So we'll talk about. So right now, don't try to be crisp. Do not do that. So here's how you want to think about this. Watermelon. Aha, right? It's a big, big, juicy, fruit over there. You can slice it many different ways, but you can only slice it if you have the watermelon, right? So what we're doing is that we're creating a watermelon of your story. These long stories, for example, the way RF wrote over here, Tuan wrote over here, they are perfect. Like Sayan wrote over here. These are perfect way of writing. There's nothing wrong with that. I typically write like 4,000 words for my Substack stories and then reduce it over polishing in draft two. Okay, we are already at 120 mark. I want you to now think about further in the story, and I want you to think about the next step, which is there was a test, the great challenge you faced, right? In this case, for me, it was about going and talking to the QA lead, admitting my mistake, telling the person, I didn't write this down because it was my old story. But when you go and write the story over there, you want to say about after I got the feedback, I went ahead and I spoke to the QA lead. And the QA lead, I apologized. I mentioned that I spoke over, I did not pay attention to the concerns. And I mentioned, can you repeat your concern that you had? And while I was saying that, I noticed that people were watching me, but I did not care. The QA lead also smiled and she said, Taha, I only had one question. And she pointed very nicely towards one diagram. And I said, oh, over here, then you would find the exception in this log over here and you can, etc., etc. I noticed after that, whenever I went to that area, heads popped. Hey Taha. This was not happening before. People would not talk to me. Now people were very comfortable speaking with me. You see, this is also an authentic way of delivering because something I noticed over there. You want to add uh, something description as sensory because somebody is reading a story so far or listening to your story. This is the promise you're delivering now, right? This is when um, Gandalf comes back with the army. So you want to show that you have won the prize. For example, I write about in my story that I became a principal. That took me, my career took off, and I learned about communication skills. I became principal engineer, etc., etc. So that's the empowerment part. The last part is very important. This is where you return with wisdom, and you are sharing the light with people. So when I'm writing online, by the way, it's already doing that part, but I basically expose it over here because you want to sometimes the lesson part you have to speak without subtext. It has to be clear. So here's what I wrote. I swallowed my pride, worked on my communication skills, and got my act together. It wasn't a walk in the park, but it paid off. But when I tell story in my interview, I talk about what I did actually. I went over there because it's faster to say. I learned to listen, ask questions, and above all, empathize with my team. My career took off like a rocket, and I became the go-to guru for top engineers in advertising. Now, this is my test, and this is my reward, right? Thanks, Vivek. But now I'm doing the lesson part. But the most crucial lesson, take extreme ownership of your words. Here's my challenge to you. Step back, reevaluate your communication style, and learn from my missteps. You might just unlock your full potential and forge deeper connections with others. So here's the whole. Now you have earned the ending. You have earned that I can say this lesson over here because you have showcased that through trial and error you have grown. Okay. Now we are at the end over here. I'm going to go a bit faster about these dialogues and all, so we can stay on track. This is the framework you have. You start with the comfort, the ordinary world, then you go towards the hunt. You do the avoidance, right? And then you meet somebody. It's very important to this avoidance part is the most difficult part to uncover in you. I want you to spend some time there. And then the partner part. Then what was the test? What did you do? The steps. Then the empowerment phase. What happened? Like what was the result? So if you think about the star format, when you talk the star format fits right over here. Situation, right? This is a task. Task basically comes in avoidance, partner, and test. But star format won't tell you this. This is why people doubt you. What do you mean? Like, who told you this? They'll start kicking you around because you haven't discussed the avoidance part and the partner part. You only talk about hunt and test. Oh, I was asked, like Arif's story, for example, right? Arif, I'm not trying to beat the story up over here. It's a very good example of talking about this, that we skip these two phases and we, in the star format, we typically come over here. And then we share the result was this. There is no lesson in star format. This is why without these two, the story does not sound authentic. Now imagine if they place these two things, right? Then they will say, "Oh my goodness, people are making up things." This is where subtext works, and we are going to go into that subtext now. Now, in the four types of stories you'll write on LinkedIn, one is called a scar story. A scar story is exactly what I just showed you. This is where you had a scar, you learned something, right? A blind spot you had. People think you're an asshole, right? Or they don't they can't understand they can't comprehend my awesome work, right? So a lesson I learned about communication. So that's a story you have. Another story could be the moment story, a tiny moment with a big meaning, a meeting, a line someone said, a silence. The same story I told you about Vivek could be that, right? A line he said, your message is your message is your responsibility. Ownership. Other could be my boss who talked about giving me feedback on allergic reactions. Let me state another piece over here. A line, a meeting, a line someone said. Oh, yes. So the boss who made me the manager, the next day I showed up in his team meeting. This is the first time, even though I was a principal engineer reporting the VP, I was never part of this leadership meeting he was having. So it was him, a senior director, a bunch of directors and managers. Not all managers, but directors and product managers and all, program managers, about 12 people. I entered the meeting 5 minutes late. Nobody cared. Sat in the corner. They were all fighting. They were all like, and what happened was I realized that my boss was against all of them. And I was their peer now, but they were all like trying to convince him about something, which I don't know what they were trying to convince him about. And he kept asking questions and questions, and you could see the heat going on both the sides. At the end, the meeting, everyone slowly backed down. All of them, placed their, what do you say, their concerns, and they stopped arguing. And then my boss made a decision, which was, let's go this way. And then the meeting finished. After the meeting, everybody else was standing in one corner and I'm having like a discussion. Boss was sitting alone on his desk. Now I used to sit right in front of him. So I saw him and he was sitting like this. He was typing and he was he was talking to himself. So I showed up and I said, "Hey, is everything okay?" But I was going there. One of the guys said, "Hey, we don't talk to him when he's like this." I still showed up. And I went around him and I said, "Is everything okay?" And he took a deep breath and then he looked at me and he said, "Today I made a decision using my position power. Don't be like me." That got me deep into thinking. That's exactly who I want to be. Two reasons. Number one, you can't convince people all the time. You ask for data. If they don't have data, and they can't convince you. You cannot go back and tell the world, hey, I made a decision because that's what we all agreed upon. No, decision making is you. You can choose. Is it data? Are you convinced? If you're not convinced, just because everybody else is convinced, you're not a leader about democracy over here. You're a leader about making a decision as to what we hired you because of your own judgment. A lot of managers make this mistake about having everyone vote in and we'll select a democratic process. No. Then why did we need you? We can just use ChatGPT and use voting mechanism, right? We can use, there's so many ways to resolve, how to do those voting. No, we depend on your judgment. That's exactly why we want you to make a decision. So that's number one thing I learned. Number two, you have to keep on ensuring that your team also understands your decision and they're able to give you feedback and you're able to ask questions. So while you make a decision that is based on only you and not listening to anybody else in that situation, you still have to give yourself feedback that I'm not doing this right. Using opposition power is not right. It's a very hard thing to balance. Third thing I learned, he was very stressed throughout. I saw this person, like he was stressed a lot, like throughout all the time. And I realized that I need to learn as a leader how to process my emotions when I go through them. So when you write these stories, I'm going to give you one key piece. As you write these stories, especially the avoidance part, when you write this draft and you are missing on the avoidance part, it is typically your body angry with you that you didn't do something right or you missed on something. So to make yourself comfortable, I tell myself, it took me a while to get to this part. I used to write my draft one and not finish it for like weeks. This is why you haven't seen so many Substack posts that I promised. Um, Now I think when I sit down, I think of that moment and I think that, I made this mistake over there. It should have been this way. I'm only a human being, but I'm willing to make myself changes. I forgive myself for making a decision. Next time this happens, I'm going to do it this way. I've learned my lesson. When you do that part, right, your body lets that thing go because your body is keeping that information or that scene in the negative feeling because there's a lesson to be learned. And if you don't take the lesson, then your body will keep on carrying it and you'll keep on feeling bad about that incident. So one of the best ways to grow is to write your conflict stories at work. So during your job search and ourselves, sit down and figure out where we can't change other people. Their opinion is their opinion. What you can do is change the way you feel about situation and take a lesson from that. That's the key piece. Storytelling does that. It is not about telling the world as to what the lesson is if you don't embody the lesson. And it comes from processing guilt. When we feel we're angry at somebody, it is generally our own anger showing in us, but we are projecting it to other people. Why were they like that? For example, you showed up to a bad boss, or boss was like intentionally like Kamina, like a bad person, right? Forgive instead of anger at that person, forgive yourself. I did not do enough research, or I made a hasty decision. Well, at that point, I needed a job. But yes, so don't convince yourself out of it. Stay there. Yes, I needed a job over there. But at the same time, I put myself into harm situation. Don't justify. Just say, I put myself into harm situation. Next time, I'll do better at that part. So you have two ways to exit, right? We keep on thinking others will accept their mistake. No, that won't happen. The easier way, so the other back door is you forgive yourself. Somebody needs forgiving. It is easier to forgive yourself. And the way to forgive yourself is always find a way where I made a wrong decision going over there and without putting negative other people. People are like this. They have their own, I can't change that part. I need to make a better decision next time. Okay. Now, with this one, I want to just quickly cover a few things before this is how it's going to be, where your stories are going to shine. So there's a moment story that you want to have, like I just talked about, where um, I had this meeting and the story that I talked about recently. Now, there's a decision story where you can talk about where, like Arif was talking about his story. I think There's a decision over that he must have made. A decision could also be my story where my boss was saying this and I made a decision at that time where even though he told me, not don't be like me, I made a decision. I will be like this. And here's why. Shows your judgment specifically. The observation story, a pattern you notice that other miss with one scene to prove it. It could be that as well. And so an observation story, for example, and I posted it yesterday on LinkedIn. This was a story I have repeated so many times. I think people also have memorized it, but I'm going to show the story over here very quickly. Observation story. Okay. Well, actually, this is a sharper story. This I haven't shared this one recently. So I once had an engineer who rarely spoke in meetings. You see that? You can resonate. Okay. And now it's an engineer as well, right? Once had a senior engineer who rarely spoke in meetings. Sharp as hell, but quiet. We assumed he was disengaged, maybe even checked out. See, the whole avoidance part, the whole piece is coming about him. That we notice that this person is not engaging with people. He's sharp as hell. Now here's the trial comes up. Then came the production outage, multi-region failure, chaos. While we were all scrambling, arguing root cause, arguing each other, he opened his laptop, stayed at Grafana, made one change. Everything came back. No speech, no swagger, just uptime. Later, over coffee, I asked why he never spoke up in those meetings. He shrugged. You all had more to say. I was listening. I think about that a lot. How we reward loud confidence when what we often need is quiet competence. You can also learn from this. So this message is not for, so engineers might think this is for me, but what I wrote down, it is specifically for managers. For engineers, I would say speak up. For leaders, I'm telling them if somebody is not speaking up, it is not about fixing them. Can you look at yourself? Maybe you need to work with that, and maybe you are giving people who are just loud, right? Instead of changing behaviors, I tell managers that how can they change their own behavior so they can work with different personalities. That's the observation over here. Somebody might argue over this, which is completely fine, but that's your story, that's your lesson. This is your spiky point, this is your judgment, right? You're not looking for likes. So that's an observation story that you may have. Okay, let's go to the next section, which is the interesting part. We did discover hooks make a promise, right? So this is we look to my coming on the first light, and then Gandalf shows up. Here is a hook that I wrote, for example. Most engineers think they are being rejected for a lack of skill, but they're not. I made a promise over here, right? I said that you're thinking you're rejected for lack of skill. You're not. And I'm also giving them dialogues over here. You see that? Here the dialogues happening. Somebody texted me. This is one of my customers whose resume I modified using the course that I have on Resume Ghostbuster. I just gave it to him. I said, hey, run this through your resume and see. And he did. And he started getting these. And he has a master's degree in product management. And he got hired by Google at the end. I wrote a story about this too. Now, here's how we are going to go those dialogues, those actions pieces. Why would people trust you? Instead of saying, I resisted, I was challenged, right? Subtext is the power of what you don't say. Here's a line I wrote. Here's a hook I wrote. The most dangerous people in tech don't yell. They smile and say, we are aligned. Like you can fill in the gaps. Somebody might say, oh yeah, I know that person. You will all have your own person who have done this piece, right? And this line is a dialogue. Now imagine if I wrote this like this. They pretend to agree but secretly block progress. Mm, it might work, but not that great, right? This hits harder. They smile and say we're aligned. I did not say they're playing politics, nothing else. I'm just showing you something, showing through action and dialogue. So subtext is all about action and dialogue. Sometimes you can skip the dialogue too, but there could be action as well. Here's Let's zoom into these posts that I wrote. At Microsoft, I once joined a war room at 2 a.m. The VP of Azure was sharing his Visual Studio screen, debugging deep in the weeds. See, there is a lot of action going on. I joined a war room at 2 a.m. You can all can start imagining. So this is called description, but it has to be minimal. If you put too much over there, which I have done so many times, and this is how I learned, be remove the fluff. I joined a war room at 2 a.m. The reason 2 a.m. was important because you're showing an executive was still there. The VP of Azure was sharing his Visual Studio screen, debugging deep in the weeds. Let's look at this one. So what happens with this one is now you're curious, what is the VP doing at this time and debugging? Like, what's this VP doing? So it will trigger two things which I wrote. One side is that there are people who disagree with this. No, a VP should not be coding. A VP should not be doing it. And then there are people who are saying, hey, you know what? It is being present over there and being with the team members, you're not alone. Imagine a leader a king who's just sitting in the palace while the entire army is fighting. And the king says, because I'm too important, or if I die, then the whole thing happens. Or the leader who's on the front because the wartime is happening. It's a mixed feeling. This is why it's a spiky point. If I write a story which was once upon a time, it won't work. At Microsoft, a junior engineer spent 3 days solving a simple caching issue. Ordinary world. But tension is over here, 3 days. And again, I'm not the hero over here. What I'm talking about is junior engineer. Her manager knew he could do it in 10 minutes, but he did not. Actually, it was me. No. So her manager, so basically it was me. I did not write over here, but a different story I did. So what's happening is that we are saying the manager could have solved this, but did not. And the engineer was facing difficulty. This is also RS kind of story where I have learned this through some other experience, but I'm applying it over here. Right. So but in this story, I don't share as to how I learned. I share about how the junior was struggling and how it helped his junior grow. I once had a manager who refused open door policies. Familiar scenario. Your boss can say, hey, I have an open door scenario, but I'm creating attention by saying he refused open door policies. And the line is not showing up because the image, but the next line actually says part of the hook. He believed in something bolder, the last 5% rule. Now you're hooked. What is the last 5% rule? Right, so now the promise is being made. Now think about, I've told you these stories, but I have not told you how they end. They are promises. Some people might go and find these stories to hey, then what happened? Like, how did you go about it? Depends on the hook you have. If some stories you can also leave an open loop. For example, a story of Inception. The movie finished, everything was resolved, but now he's spinning his totem and he doesn't know, and that it wobbles and then finishes. Now we are left. Hey, was it real? Was it a dream? Like now we are stuck. So that some of the people will do that part as to leave an open loop. It's an advanced storytelling style. Don't do it right now. But you will notice that if you leave a promise and you don't fulfill in a story, people will not like it. So make sure the claim you're making on the top, like Gandalf, you deliver your promise. Okay, next is characters and objects and description. Here's so subtext is about characters, right? I talked about hotshot software engineer, and throughout that story, you could see like my character was forming, right? Through dialogue and various different things. So I'm lying to my mom that I'm going to full loop interviews and I'm not able to clear text screens. That's a message I got from one of my clients. Right? She has now look at the likes, 61 likes, 62 likes, one is mine, and few comments, but 30,000 impressions. Right? I'm lying to her. So this is a dialogue she's telling me. It's also so authentic, deep, right? And I'm not able to take this screen. So now I can deliver this promise over here. If your mentee says that's a promise I'm making. Now imagine this one. I found this when somebody wrote it, and I took a screenshot. If you look at this text, how many of you actually think this is real conversation versus made up conversation? And if for either way, I want you to tell me why. I mean, it would be great to see because this is exactly how you will realize that what mistakes you are making by watching good examples and also watching bad examples. I don't think this is true, by the way. Okay. So far, okay, same. I think conversation is made up. Okay, Tuan. Why? But Tuan, why do you think it's made up?
Uh, I can't describe it. It's just the language. The way it talk is not natural at all.
It's too polished, right?
Yeah.
People don't type. We know people don't type, and they're exposing a lot. It looks like they're trying to put backstory into it too, right? People don't talk speak like that. This is very important that for us to understand, right? They're trying to put backstory and inform you, excuse me, all due respect. No, people don't write like this on chat. If that's happening, this was too made up. So the other part I also want you to notice, these are full sentences. So one way when you write online, you also want to change the rhythm. And in your dialogues, the dialogues need to have that rhythm as well, and also that um, the texture of the personality. So it doesn't reveal any personality over it. It just looks like a very polished conversation. Like people are like scared of saying it polished. Like for me, you're an asshole, right? And the message is your. So the whole point about delivering wisdom that comes across, it needs to go through some regular dialogues and some. And if you write things in these paragraphs, no, people don't type like this. They're like, clack, clack, hey, what the hell is going on, right? So my point to tell you this part is if we try to manufacture things, anyone can see that. And this is when you lose issues. I mean, you will lose your respect. People will stop trusting you. Anything you put out there afterwards, think about once somebody has put shit on it, everything will start smelling. This person makes up shit. Like, this is not true. So you want to not do this piece. Now, one good part I'll tell you is that LinkedIn obviously give your post to 10% of the people at your own audience. So it is in a way forgiving, but don't try to be authentic. Don't be authentic, inauthentic. Like, it doesn't work like that. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so this is the final story. I'm going to walk you through, and I want you folks to take a pen or paper and write down what things you're noticing. This is my story about how I became a coach. It's over few slides. September 2021, Greece. My wife and I bumped into a tarot reader. Next year, you're going to become a coach, she says, voice calm and cryptic, like Yoda handing down a prophecy. Can you imagine a tarot reader like that saying this to me and my wife? Next year, you're going to become a coach, she says, voice calm and cryptic, like Yoda handing down a prophecy. We all have seen some magical thing and people doing that part. So you can now start thinking about it. The reason it makes it specific is because I'm using my wife's name, I'm using a specific date over here, I'm using a location over here. Okay. And then let's go to this piece. Nazia and I exchanged a look, then cracked up. The reader wasn't offended. She smiled. You see, the character is building up. Her character is building up. It also builds up my character, Nazia's character, that we don't believe in tarot reader, right? Something is happening. Why did we crack up? He's been trying to convince me this entire trip that he wants to coach people full time, Nazia says, waving a newly bought notebook with a playful smirk. Well, now he has a magical backup. You think about it, there's a dialogue going on, and then we cracked up. There was a thing, and she wasn't offended. She smiled. You can also imagine that happening. And then suddenly she's saying, "Hey, he's been trying to convince me this entire trip." So what you thought over him being cracked up, making fun of her, was not the case. The case is actually that I've been actually having these thoughts already in my mind, and she has this notebook that she just bought, and now we have a magical backup. Then she flips another card. Don't worry, the reader continues. He's going to be an international coach, helping many people. Another card. He'll be known. He'll give speeches. She slips out of character for a second, adopting a more casual tone. I think this means social media, Instagram, Facebook. I could have used over here something called she slips out of her mystic tone instead of character, because this is exposing. Mystic tone is more describing a texture of a voice, right? Let's see, I'm getting chat messages over here just to see. Okay, good. Incredible prophecy. That is true. um, Let's go to the next one. So I want you to keep on noticing the character is building, the dialogue is building, the story is moving forward, right? And then outside, I didn't flinch. Inside, full blown panic because social media, Facebook, that era was behind me. I hated them. Then her finger landed on the last card. He is going to write. People will like what he writes. And just like that, I felt the first tremor of defeat. My high school writing grade, a solid C. I had zero interest in writing anything beyond code and strategy docs. If you notice so far, ordinary world, you walked into Tarot Reader, you were not thinking about it, then she starts doing things, which is Tarot Reader. And then there's also dialogue happening, right? Objects being introduced, notebook being introduced, right? Dialogues happening at the same time, prophecy is going on, right? I've been called for adventure, like to hunt. And then suddenly I'm feeling inside. First of all, Facebook, social media, I hated those pieces, right? So there is avoidance coming up very clearly. Then there is a part about her continue to going, oh, he will write as well. And now I have completely thought about I can't do this because my challenge, and it came from the past, right? That my high school writing grade was solid C. There's a full story over there I can write at a different point. Now, this is my challenge. I've been avoiding. Now I'm feeling I can't do this piece. As we walked away, Nazia noticed my mood. You seem down. Social media, writing, yeah, like that's ever going to happen. She stopped, turned me around, and placed a hand on my chest. This makes perfect sense, she said. Why don't you coach yourself? You see that? Partner, a coach, someone who challenges me using my own logic over here. So it works because I'm a coach, right? She's telling me, why don't you coach yourself? Now think about this, right? How it's happening. It's still showing my resistance towards that. It's not, oh yeah, I could do that part, right? She's saying, you seem down. Yeah, social media writing. So this is all subtext. I'm not saying over here, I could have written this down one line. Like, I did not believe in writing my that I can do this part versus showing through dialogues, through imagery. And then this whole thing, she stopped, turned me around, and placed a hand on my chest. This is action. And because it's a huge dialogue over there, like the same one about people think you're an asshole, right? For example, you are taking more time, and the reader has already read halfway, which means that they're emotionally invested in the story. So now you can go slower. In the beginning, you want to go fast. We are walking, we went to tarot reader, and this is what she's doing. So now you're into it. But now you can slow the cadence down. And that's what hits people emotionally. This makes perfect sense. Why don't you coach yourself? 3 months, now I'm going to expose. 3 months later, I resigned as head of engineering at a Series D startup and started Taha's method. I had no idea how it would happen, but it did. See, I'm also leaving something over here for you to understand. I had no idea how it happened, but it did. Today, 75K people show up, not for validation, but to be challenged. After this, I have a huge list of people. I thank my audience as well. I have skipped this part. Then I go into this piece. And Nazia, she saw it long before I did. The night before we left Greece, she slipped that newly bought notebook into my bag. For when you're ready, she teased. I laughed, tossed it aside. Months later, one quiet morning, I found it again. Its first page still untouched. I picked up a pen and I started writing. Now you think about this. I had no idea how it happened. Yeah, I did not know how it happened, but it happened. So I'm delaying this a little bit. And when I finish this over here as to how it happened, I'm not saying my wife believed in me and she pushed me and then I started reciting. No, I'm describing how it happened. So it's more believable as well. Exactly. There are many things that happened. But these pieces I took out specifically to make the story more coherent. There are pieces which you will kill in your own story. What's his name? Hemingway says that kill your darlings. So when you finish your draft one, there are pieces in it which you would want to keep because you love them. But you would have to kill them because they don't deliver anything to the audience. It's just for you. So in draft one, I want you to write everything you have. Stephen King says, write your first draft with the door closed. It is all for you. What I come to realize it is for you to process your emotions about that time. And those emotions are only for you. So once you write them down, throughout the day, the next day, you will feel those emotions. And when you are feeling, you have processed the emotions, then you open the door and then you edit your story. You will start killing the darlings you'll realize are only for you and doesn't do for your audience any good. Now, I want you to notice one part over here. Newly bought notebook. that came up in the beginning. Audience resonate with objects, smell, characters. Introduce objects over there if you have them. With this, I'm going to finish this with one last quote. I was watching yesterday Jay Kelly, amazing movie. It's about an actor. And the movie starts with this amazing dialogue. It's a hell of a responsibility to be yourself. It is much easier to be somebody else or nobody at all. When you write online, while I started writing my stories and then looking at how other people are writing these stories, you are trying to be yourself. And it is not easy because trying to be yourself requires you to admit things you have done, process those places. But this is where writing will bring you clarity as to who you are. You will stop pleasing people. I don't please people anymore online. In fact, my writing is becoming a bit more pokey. I poke people a lot in writing, and it's going to get more spiky actually next year. So I want you to understand that you are writing, you're growing, and you're maturing because you're processing your life events. Right? Remember this line: you want to have the responsibility. You have this responsibility. You have to be yourself. With this, I'm going to finish, and we are going to do a Q&A. If there's any Q&A, we are like way over time. Someday I'll write a story about this as to how I used to take twice the time to explain things and how I learned that to say something with clarity in a short burst. That's a great question, Arjun. So what happened was that previous sessions we did not record any, meaning we did not publish those sessions. Those sessions um, were not recorded. And this is also recorded, but I'm going to publish this through my newsletter tomorrow. So you'll have a video of this. I'm looking forward for a better place that I'm researching until we join next year to start next year, a better curriculum. People have asked that can we pick topics in advance? I think Priya mentioned that multiple times, and we are going to do that. I have to figure out how, because you can pick a topic, but what if like I don't have material on this, right? And I just want to show up with some advice. Oh, because somebody asked, there's an advice for it. I prepare for it. It also takes a while to prepare this material and deliver it, and it also requires me to process uh, many things. So I am looking forward to the next year with a better curriculum, a better way to access videos, a better way for you to take learnings from here. Thank you for mentioning that. So right now I don't have sessions for. There are initial sessions we did. They are there, but I would say not even half of them are there. But going forward, we will have them. That's a great story. I love this part. Fahad. So let me say a quick story over there, which I did, and I did not share that with you folks. So, but this is exactly this question that I needed to answer you. It's a very good question. So here's a story that I had, which I wrote in my this story became, by the way, I got a lot of likes. People also came because I wrote a story as a manager. So in my first performance review, my this is how it started. My manager said, "Your team loves you, but there were no promotions." My boss started my performance review. So I gave you an okay rating. Disappointed, I asked why. He said, "You've been a manager for just a year. You may be making the classic rookie mistake, avoiding micromanagement." Looking at my puzzled face, he broke it down like this: "You're unknowingly avoiding important management work, assuming they're micromanagement. As a result, your team stays in comfort zone. Nobody grows, nobody gets promoted, then the work gets boring." And I was baffled. He was right. How did I not see this? So he asked. So I asked, how do I know what is truly micromanagement? Write down what you think is too much, then reflect on it. The following year, add a new boss. And then I'm showing the results. People got promoted. And then here are the three things I learned. This is like a story about somebody said 4 fears, right? Now, here's what happened. This did not happen. He did not say this. My boss actually told me, this is the second boss I had. He was Yahoo's chief architect. And this is after the VP. who made me manager. He started a video organization at Yahoo, and my team was placed temporarily under the chief architect. And this guy was not a people guy. He told me on day one. He was like taking notes, and he said, after all the notes he took, he turned towards me and said, "Come to me for anything except people issues. I don't deal in people. You're only here temporarily under my team for 6 months." I said, "Okay." The guy is straightforward. So when he gave me this feedback, I was like amazed. Wow, this is great feedback. Then he said, I said, "What do I do?" And he said, "Pick one engineer on your team and do everything you think is micromanagement to this person." I had a guy in my head, and I'm thinking, what the hell? If I start doing those things, which I think, like everything. He said, if you think calling out in public if feedback is wrong, do it. If you think saying you're late, do it. If you think giving this person 20% additional workload to stretch him, do it. And this is how you would learn. I mean, if I write bad post online, I will learn from that, right? The problem is, there's a person. And if you do things to people, they will remember it. And not just that, it will destroy them, right? So I asked him that if I do this, what happens to this person? And he said that first we'll tell HR, this is an exercise that we're learning for you. And so if he complains to the HR, then HR will ignore it and give us the feedback. I was like, damn, this is like this happens. That you can do that. I was like so amazed. And also like it was weird and I was afraid. Then he said, and I said, okay, so what happens to a person? What do I do? And he says that, and then he had his own way of saying, like ignoring that part. And he said that you will learn at the cost of one and many will benefit. It's collateral damage. Without saying collateral damage, he was saying collateral damage. Chief architect telling me to do this. And he said, think about this. So I went to my previous boss, the VP, who was actually the people manager. I asked him, hey, dude, this is what he's saying. He said, your boss is ex-military. They don't believe in torturing people physically. They believe in mental torture and they're okay with it. Then he said, are you going to do this? I said, no, I'm not going to do this. Good man. And I did not do this part. But how do I write this part? It's the story by itself. I did write it in a different way once I processed it in a way that it is not. But I replace this piece by saying, hey, if I remove this piece, what can I put over here that sounds like, which was basically me. What I did was in my head, I thought, okay, what do I think where I'm doing too much? Where can I go and like squeeze? So I made it his dialogue and he said, write down what you think is too much and do it like that. And so there are places where you will find and sometimes you will expose people if you want to, but without their name and things like it. I had been ignoring writing my Microsoft stories. I had 5 bosses in 3.5 years. A lot to process. All right, let's see more questions over here. Um, awesome. Okay, let's see if you have more questions and then we'll finish. We are way over, and thank you so much for staying and learning. Key thing is to write down some story, then let it sit. Keep a gap between publishing stories. Stories take longer to publish. Don't like think about, I'm going to write something today and then just do it. The key about story is you want to learn, you want to grow from it. Without that, it's just you're not doing yourself a justice. The goal is to be responsible to show up as yourself in the world. Yes, how to narrow down a story iteratively. So think about so first is that I intentionally did not use, even though I had ChatGPT open, I did not give you ChatGPT. You are going to get this video. I will also give you the slide deck along with that. It's going to come on that newsletter subscription. You all are part of the newsletter subscription. If you're not, subscribe to it. It's going to be a free post as well, so anybody can access that. Take that framework that I gave you, right? And some of my examples and give it to ChatGPT. This is where I want you to play with ChatGPT. Instead of me giving you exact prompts, you guys are software engineers and leaders. I need to only give you a direction. If I prescribe you too much, then you'll just depend on my ChatGPT scripts. Just write down, act like a master storyteller. Here is the version that I want you to use, chapter. Or you can also say hero's journey, whichever you want to. Like, or say, here's my story. I want you to shape my story for LinkedIn. Now, ChatGPT will do things to you and give meaning your story and shape it the way it does. You want to then mention, hey, I think which things I taught you. I think you're missing a subtext over here. Write that down. You're missing subtext over here. Write down that you are missing um the hook is not bold. I want you to make a promise. I told you all these key elements. There are many things you can do. But if you talk about make a promise, do some foreshadowing, write in subtext, the dialogue does not feel authentic, right? Challenge it. You can also give, like, I want you to make this engineer South Asian living in America now. So it will start, the dialogue will also have that texture. If you don't remember it, the texture will come along. I have I have good memory in when people say things to me. We all have, people leave this mark on us. Just writing everything down, hey, how you're doing, etc., doesn't stick around, right? What sticks around is what they said and exactly what your audience wants to read. So the dialogues will appear naturally as you live in that moment. But the dialogues will be behind your guilt or anger in those moments. So that's why they're not showing up. So when you write those things down and you sit down in that anger and all, they will start surfacing up. Yeah, I realized the session. Thanks, Umang. I think that the session was like I mentioned in the beginning. It's an entire meal. It's not an appetizer. Last one was just an appetizer for us to get going. I want you to watch the session again. Think about the stories. Copy paste from my stories or other people and use them. Thank you, Anurag. Thank Zufisha. Thanks. Thank you, Fahad. Thank you, Arif. Arif, your story is really good. I want you to think about the past one where you learned. It can become an excellent story if you have two scenes mixed together. Awesome. Hey, Tuan, thank you. Thank you, Tuan. So here's what's happening. If you have friends who you think can join Top Tech Leader, they can get a huge discount. I'm going to email everyone um, today when the video is uploaded, today or tomorrow, and mention that anyone who gets into the Top Tech Leader course, these sessions are actually going to be the Q&A sessions because the course is by itself just videos. These sessions, you don't have to have the course, but it does help. If you take that course, so these sessions from going forward from next month for the entire year, it's going to be $17 per month. Once we do it 4 times a month or 3 to 4 times a month. Now, if you enroll in the course, it is included for you for the entire year. I mean, next year is completely free. Anyone who joins before December 31st, this is included. These sessions will be included for the entire year. Grandfathered. After that, yes, you will have to pay for $17 per month, but for the entire next year is included. I will also give you a special discount for $549. So if anyone's interested, reply back to me. I'll also do the coupon code so you can purchase that. If you have friends who are not part of this, invite them. We learn together. See how much we learn together by anyone who shared over here the examples, right? Amazing examples. I love this part. This is how we learn together. Awesome. I'm going to finish this over here and see you guys next year. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Daga.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.